Hello and welcome to the Alpha Software Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products here at Alpha Software. And today we are going to be continuing our discussion on building an application starting with the Security Framework Genie. So last week we took a look at the Security Framework Genie and used it to actually build out a sample application for us, or a really simple application for us, but one that had login and administrative features and other things. Today, we're going to be adapting the work that the Genie did for us, and we're going to be taking it and turning it into what we call a UX component from a tabbed UI. We'll be doing that. We'll be going through some other aspects of converting this so that it can be used for mobile use as well as web. But before I get started, I want to make sure that people can see my screen and can hear my voice. So if you could just type yes in the questions box, that would be great. Okay, wonderful. Thanks very much, everyone. So if you recall, last week we were taking a look at a tabbed UI interface that Alpha Anywhere actually built for us. And this basically had a home screen, and it had account settings that all users who are logged in could get to. And we had some administrator settings. Oops, sorry about that. Come on. And we had administrator settings, which were only available to administrators. When you clicked on a particular menu option, that meant that would appear here, as you would expect, and it opened up what was called a tab. Now, it doesn't exactly look like a tab. It kind of looks like a button or something like that. You can style them so they look exactly like tabs, and that's why we call it the tabbed UI interface. The tabbed UI interface is terrific, and it's great for building web applications. The problem is that it's not terribly responsive, so it doesn't work very well on mobile, where you've got smaller screen sizes. So today what we want to do is we want to take the tabbed UI component that Alpha built us and create a new version of it as a UX component. But we want to reuse as much work as we possibly can. So we want to make this as easy on us as possible. So by the end of today, we will have basically taken all of the functionality out of here and put it into there. And then in a follow-up webinar, we're going to take this new UX webinar and we are going to style it so that it looks sharp. We're going to create some places where you can add your own content. And we'll really just make it a great getting started tool for anyone who wants to build a new application. All right, so let's start with where we started last week. I'm going to pop over here to my machine. And I'm actually just going to quickly review what we did last week, which was, is we did a new project here in the Web Projects control panel. So we did it using clicking the right button, not that one. Yeah, new project, here we go. Let's call this webinar test. And we said we wanted to enable the security framework. I showed this to you last week, so I'm going to go through it just very quickly right now, just as a review. When we did that, we decided to let these defaults alone. We decided that we wanted to use an extended user information table. We connected it to a connection string that we had already built. This time it was Northwinds. And we said that we wanted to create some system tables. In particular, we were interested in the active users one. Again, for that, we needed to specify a connection string. Once all that was done, I said, yes, enable the security framework. Security framework has been enabled. And it ended up building out, yes, I do. And it ended up building out basically our interface. Okay on that, and here we go. So here we'll take a look at the web components that it built for us. It built a series of UXs, one for resetting the password, one for showing you how many active users are logged in, one for deciding on two-factor authentication. These were all built as separate UXs. So let's go ahead and dive into one and just take a look at it. Let's take a look at reset password, for example. So reset password, yep, create it back up. Reset password is a fairly simple UX component. And if we look at it in working preview, it won't let us do anything because you're not currently logged in. But basically what it did is it would have a box for username and password. Let's go back into design to show it to you. So here's the new password. This is a confirmation of the password. There's the reset button. And that's all it did, was it reset the password. That's all this UX component was needed for. So we had one for there. We had one for, like I said, basically 5 other areas as well. And we put them into, or Alpha did that for us. He put them into a master tabbed UI interface. Let's click on the tabbed UI interface, and I'll show you what that looks like. Now, a tabbed UI interface is a really, really easy way to build a web interface that calls the different UXs that you've put together. So to do that, in this case, all they did was they added a button here up at the top, and then they added some additional buttons that opened up each of these UXs. So they just basically went over here, tabbed UI buttons, and they said, okay, I would like to open a component. And they chose, say, the active users component. I clicked OK. And then that was added to the list. And if I went into working preview, it would appear here. I can't use that one, unfortunately, because that one is restricted to an admin. I'm not logged in as an admin. Sorry, bad example. But that's really all it takes to put together a master tabbed UI. You just go in, choose the component. You can organize them into frames like we've done here. And that's it. The only other thing I want to point out is there's a logout button up here at the top. When you click it, it invokes a piece of JavaScript which logs you out of the application and brings you back to the home page. So like I said, this is great, and let's go ahead and run it. Save changes, nope. And let's just see what it looks like. So when I'm going to say that we want to run it and we want to go to login A5W. This is the first page in our project. And so this should open up in a browser at our login screen. Let me close these other tabs so I don't confuse myself. Oh, me too. And I will log in. Again, it showed us what the usernames and passwords were that it created for us by default. So user1 at alpha.com. This person is set up as an admin. If I log in, here is that tabbed UI that it created. Now let's take a look at that tab UI. I think I showed you something last week where you could go into active users, for example, and we'll go ahead and refresh the data, and it can show you what's been going on, who's been logging in, who's been using the system, provided you are an administrator. But as I pointed out, this is great on web, but it wouldn't be great on mobile. And here's why. Let's say you're shrinking the screen size down to what might be a phone size. Take a look at that. You really just can't read any of the stuff here in this chart. And we're wasting an awful lot of space here on the left with the navigation, which you wouldn't do typically in a mobile app, but actually works great in when you do have the real estate, because you can quickly check and move from option to option. So the question is, how do we get this into a format that will work nicely on a phone? And for that, we're going to go ahead and build a UX to do that. So I'm going to actually switch back over to my default where I have pre-built a UX here called the master UX, and we're going to take a look at that. Let's go into controls. And so the master UX looks like this. If I go into working preview, let's open this up. You'll see that I don't have, okay, this is the home UX component. You'll see that, like the tabbed UI, I'm loading components onto the screen, some subcomponents that were already built for me by the security genie. But instead of having all of that navigation space wasted here, I put it here into a menu. So here I'm allowed 2 things, home and logout, and that's only because I'm logged in as a person who doesn't have permissions to see other things. So let's go ahead and do a live preview because that'll give us a better example. Let's do live test, log in. Okay, user1 at alpha.com, user1 alpha. All right, so now I'm logged in. Now I'm logged in now to the UX version. And if I take a look at the menu, I have the same menu choices that I had in the tabbed UI. So let's say I wanted to go to active users. I could click on active users, and there they are. And as you can see, let me go ahead and refresh the data. If I take this and I shrink it down, it becomes actually still quite readable on a phone. And if you're holding that phone in landscape mode, even the summary data looks fine. So let's, oh, sorry, even the detailed data looks fine. Let's go ahead and choose detail. And you'll see that's actually quite readable. And we could have even optimized this UX a bit more to make it even more readable on the screen. And in fact, we'll probably do that in our next session when we style the application. So the question is, how do we actually build something like this? Well, we do that by creating a new UX. Start with a new UX. I'll start here right from scratch. And I will go ahead and I'm going to insert what we call a panel navigator. So if you'll recall, when we had a tabbed UI interface, when you clicked on options, they'd appear in Windows on the right. We use a different that you could then close. In UXs, we tend to use what are known as panel cards. And I know I've done a session on panel cards before, but let's go ahead and put in a panel navigator. And let's add in a panel card. And we'll insert that after. And now I've got a panel card. The card and the navigator hang out here as a set. The card contains the information that we want to show, and the navigator lets us go from card to card. Right now we just have one card. In my other example, though, you'll see, let me close that one. You will see you'll see that I've built a bunch of cards. I built a card called Home. I built a card called Activity. I built a card called Extended Info, one called Two-Factor, one called Change Password, and so on all the way down. And I think I did one for logouts. I didn't do a logout card. I do have an option for it, though. The other thing I did when I put together this interface was I inserted into the panel navigator, I put in a panel header. And I think I just right-clicked to choose that, and I chose panel header, and it created it for me. And inside that panel header, which I'll show you in working preview, which is up here, I put in what we call a navigation bar. And I know that's something that we covered earlier in this year, but we'll take a look at it again today. So in this control bar, let's double click on that. A control bar is made out of basically your control bar layout, of which you can have multiple, is designed up here in the control bar layout section. And here you can add and edit lines to it. You can decide, whoops, I'm going to say edit line. You can decide what's going to come at the before, the middle, or the after on the menu bar. What we've done in our menu bar is we've had a piece of static text, which I call HTML title, and a nav menu, which I'm going to show you how to edit in just a second. And those went together to create a menu that looks like this, like the one that you just saw. Okay, so each of these two things here are called items. This first one was an HTML item. The second one was a menu item. And those get created over here in the items tab when you're inserting one of these control bar controls. For the HTML title, all I did was I said add control bar item, and I chose the HTML title as the option. And all I did here was I just placed HTML text that said admin UX version. Not a very exciting piece of text, but that's it. The nav menu, however, is kind of interesting. So here's the nav menu. And again, I just added that by saying add control bar item. And this time you could say button or drop down menu. And that's what I chose. I chose that option there. And when we're here in the navbar menu, when you insert one of these, you get to define the menu definition. And the menu definition, you actually have a couple ways of defining it, but one way, probably the most popular, is using the menu builder. So we're using the menu builder. I just click here and I can start adding the items that I'd like to have appear in my menu. So I have home, extended information, two-factor authentication, change password, and all of those things that I've had here before. Now, if you recall, so here's how you add an item. It's actually really simple. You just say, click add item. Say it's assembling, and I'm going to call this my new item. And now that'll just appear in the menu. But if you want it to actually do something when it appears in the menu, you have to hook up a little bit of JavaScript to it. And the JavaScript that you're going to hook up is the JavaScript used to select the active panel. So for each of these, as I pointed out, I created separate panels for them, separate panel cards. So when I click on one of these buttons, like let's say change password, and I look at its on-click event, you'll see I put in this one bit of JavaScript called dialog.object panel set active, and that takes a parameter called change password. How did I know this? Am I good at remembering JavaScript? I am not. I use the helper tools that are here in Edit Actions, so let me show you that right now. If you want to insert a UX component method, like we've done here, just click here and it will give you an interface which will let you search for them. So I happen to know that it was called set panel, no, set active panel. Yeah, here we go, panel set active. And I basically, all I had to do is I had to select that from the list. It pasted it in for me. And then when I erased the parameters and I put in like a space, you'll see this menu appears. And here it asks me which UX panel I want to activate. I right click, I choose the one that's appropriate. In this case, we run change password, so I would choose change password. I'm not going to do that now because obviously it's already working. Exit, save changes. So that's how you add those little JavaScript bits to it, and that's how you tell it to get from one place to the other. It's a really simple way. You create one panel card for each part of your application that you'd like to navigate to. You build a menu that lists out those panel cards, and then you use the on-click event so that when you choose that menu item, it goes right to that panel card. All right, so I'm going to cancel out of here. I don't need to save those changes. Right. And so the result is basically a system where I can move from panel card to panel card. Now, we've talked about, let's see what else we want to go over. So there's one other sort of tricky thing that you want to say. It's not really that tricky, but if in your panel card, in your control bar in the nav menu, one of our navigation choices is called logout. Here it is right here. Now logout works a little bit differently from the other choices. It is in fact an Ajax callback that logs out the application and then passes back in a command telling it to then go back to the login page. We talked about Ajax callbacks, I think 3 weeks ago, but I'm going to show it to you again, just so you see how it works. So when I'm saying logout, this on-click event is going to run a little action that I've called logout. Let's go take a look at that action in depth. Bang, bang. And that would be over here under JavaScript actions. So I created a JavaScript action to run. It's like a little JavaScript snippet. Did it over here. And I created one called logout. Let's go ahead and edit that action and show you how it's built. So this is action JavaScript. So this is one of the actions that I could have added. One is called Ajax callback. You'll see there are a whole bunch of other actions that button could have performed, or that script could have performed. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to edit the action for the Ajax callback. And if you recall, the structure for an Ajax callback typically is you have it call an internal or a server-side function. So when this script is run, it's going to run a server-side function. It's going to pass in information or any data that I might need from the form is going to get passed back. I actually don't need any in this case because this is just a logout component. And then to do this, I then created what my xbasic function would be. So it's going to call a function. It's going to get a result from that function. That function is going to be JavaScript. It'll execute that JavaScript. Let's take a look at the function declaration because it's actually really simple. All I need to do to log out is I need to make one call up here called context security.logout. That's that context security object you might know about. This command will log you out, but it only logs you out on the server, so you don't actually know anything has happened on the browser side until you actually try to do something else. What you typically do, though, is once you log someone out, is you don't just leave them on that same page. You bring them back to the login screen. And to do that, I've just put in a very simple piece of JavaScript, which is window.location.href, and then the name of the page I'd like it to go back to, the login page. So when this function is called, this piece of JavaScript comes back into the browser executes that JavaScript, and it takes you back to login.a5w. And if all works, which I believe it has, it should work. Let's take a look. Save changes, no. Cancel. Do you want to save your edits? Nope. And I'm going to cancel out of here. No. Okay. Let's go back to live test. And I'm going to go to, we'll take a look at our login page. It's the first page to open once it's run. Okay. user1@admin.com. user1admin. Oh, it's not admin, it's alpha. That's a typo I make all the time. Okay. Go to login, and you'll see our menu works up here. If I wanted to go to, say, the maintain active users and groups, I could click on that, and it appears here. And if I log out here, and you'll see it brings me back to the login page. So this works very much the way that I'd like it to. I don't love the styling, which we'll do next time. But before we go, there's one last thing I wanted to show you, and that is back here in the tabbed user interface. If you recall, this administrator only menu choices only appear if I'm logged in as an administrator. In other words, that's how I'm assigned in the security setting. Over here in the UX, we also have things in the menu, and you'll notice we've kind of made them flat. We might want to indent them. I'll show you how to do that. Put them into subcategories. But more importantly, we don't want to allow the ability to maintain active user groups and to take a look at the active users. We don't want these menu choices to even appear if the user is not an admin. If they're just a regular user, we want to hide these choices, and we don't want to let them go to those panel cards. There's one other thing I'd like to point out about panel cards, and that is that even though we've used basically a programmatic technique to move from place to place, if you don't disable it by default, your users will be able to slide from place to place. And that's all well and good, except if they're sliding into a panel card that you don't want them to have access to. So what I would suggest doing when you put together a UX like this is the first thing is first tell the UX that you only, let's go into controls here. Tell the UX that you only want to move from panel card to panel card programmatically. I'm going to click here, and I'm going to say programmatic. That way they just can't, with their finger or with their mouse, slide from card to card. So that'll hide any card that they can't get to from the menu system. But how do we stop the menu system itself from stopping you from making those selections? Well, that's actually something that's already built into the menu. So I'm going to click on Control Bar. We'll take a look again at that menu definition, and we'll go into the builder here. And so let's take a look at one that everyone's allowed to use. That's the change password one. Okay. So change password is something that no matter what group you're in, as long as you're logged in, you should be allowed to change your own password. So I've selected that one, but if you'll see here under properties, there's this section under security called security groups. If I click on security groups, you'll notice I've checked them for each one of those security groups so that no matter what security group you're in, you will be allowed to change your password. Now, for active users, that's not the case. If I go into active users, you'll see I've only allowed administrators to go in and make that choice. So I'm going to click OK. Cancel out of that because I didn't really make any changes. Cancel, cancel. I'm going to save that UX so that we can no longer move from panel to panel just by clicking and dragging. And I'm going to go ahead and run that. And let's take a look to see. And this time we're not going to log in as user 1. We're going to log in as user 2. User 2 does not have admin privileges, so they should see something different in their menu. So user 2 at alpha.com, user 2 alpha. I'm going to go ahead and click login. And, oh, I don't have permission to see this page because it's trying to take me immediately to a page that I'm not allowed to see. So what have I done wrong? Let's take a look at our master UX. And let's see, the first tab is the home tab. And that should be the one that you arrive on first. Let's make sure that I've got permissions to see this particular tab or component. I don't think I've done it, set anything at the security level here. Oh, but I should be able to see mastery. Okay, let's close that. if you're not sure, you can always right click on a component and see what its permissions have been set to. So if I right click and I go component security, all I have here is requires login. So that should let me in. Maybe it was something as simple as I typed it wrong. Let's go back to that web browser window and see what I've done wrong. So let's go back into here. And guys, I promise this actually definitely worked before the demo today. So, okay, user1 at alpha.com, user1 alpha. So that's user1. We know that person should work. Great. We'll log out and we'll log in as user2. User2 at alpha.com, user2 alpha. We'll log in. Interesting. Well, I'll have to figure out what that is for next time. I did something wrong setting up the permissions on that page, clearly. Can't think offhand what it might be, but let's take a look at, oops. Go back in here to remote desktop. That one I'm not sure about. Anyway, we'll figure that out for next time when we come back to style the app. So we talked today about how Alpha Anywhere builds tabbed UI interfaces by using the web security genie. How tabbed UIs are great for mobile, or great for web, but are not so great for mobile. And that to make a mobile interface, you really want to build using what we call a UX component. So we showed you how to build that UX component and how to call all the sub UXs in it. We talked about sort of the paradigm difference between the panel cards and the tabs, between the UX and the tabbed UI. We talked a little bit about the menu navigation and the control bar. We talked a little bit about how to add in the logout button to that. And the last thing I want to cover is how do you change the security framework so that it calls the right page? So if you recall, when we first set this up, the page that after you log in wants to be called is one called the tabbed UI master tabbed UI. And so by default, once you have basically logged in, that's where it's going to take you. We want instead to go to this new thing that I built, this new page, the UX master layout page. So just to show you where you set up that setting, that happens over here under web security. And you go under security configuration, click edit, and then you go over here to login options. It's one of the login options, and the option is what page should I redirect to after login? And that's really where I selected it from here. And I could change it back if I wanted to. I'm not going to. All right, so that's pretty much what I want to cover here. We'll figure out what my bug is on the nav bar for next time. And next time we want to dive into styling. Let me see if there are any questions though. Hold on a moment and we'll take a look. Oh, all right, no questions, but someone just said, hey, did you check the permissions on the A5W page itself to make sure that it had the right permissions? Thank you so much. I'm almost positive that's what I forgot. So let's, that looks like really the only question here. So let's go ahead and tackle that one before we go today. We're going to go over to the Web Projects Control Panel, A5W pages, a UX master layout. That's my A5W page. I'm going to right click. I'm going to say page security. That requires login. That looks okay to me. Let's take a look though at page property in page security. Okay, log in. That's fine. Oh, I'm so tantalizingly close, I'm sure, but I'm not going to get it right now. So we'll work it out for next time. Hey, everyone, thanks so much for showing up and asking questions. Next week, I am away, but I may still be hosting anyway. The person doing the main presentation, though, is going to be Robin Bennett. And as you've seen, he tends to do some pretty cool stuff. Last time it was AI. I can't wait to see what it's going to be next week. And then the week following, we're going to dive back into this application and we're going to take it from its sort of very bland look and style it so it looks like a nice, modern, ready-to-use application. So I hope you can join us. Until then, take care, stay well, and send your questions to guides@alphasoftware.com.